was Therion with Kali Yuga Part 2. Diabolus in Musica with Shadow of the Throne. And Threshold with Staring at the Sun, hopefully on the phone here. Can you hear me, Walter?
Sure can.
Awesome. All right. First of all, you're on WVBR FM Ithaca. And on the phone we have Walter Cruttenden, who is the author of The Lost Star of Myth and Time. Correct?
That's right, yeah.
And when did that come out?
2005.
Okay. And you did a documentary as well?
Yes, it's called The Great Year, narrated by James Earl Jones, and it deals with the same topic, this general idea that history or consciousness moves in these vast cycles of time.
Okay, sorry, I was getting a little feedback. And you're also the founder of the Binary Research Institute?
Yes, that's here in Newport Beach, California, where we research this solar system motion, its cause and consequences, because we believe that that is sort of behind this idea that history moves in cycles, and it just as you have, the cycle of day and night caused by the Earth spinning on its axis, or the cycle of the seasons by the Earth's orbit around the sun, so too did many ancient cultures believe in this cycle of alternating dark and golden ages that Plato called the Great Year. And so we're investigating solar system motion as a way to explain that cycle.
And normally the cycle is explained by the wobble of the Earth.
Yes, well, it's the precession observable, where you see the stars move retrograde across the sky at the rate of about 50 arc seconds per year, which means that, it takes like 25,000 years for all the stars to go around once, is thought to be caused by the Earth simply wobbling. And we recognize that there are some little wobbling to the Earth caused by, gravitational effects and other things like this, but that the main observable is actually due to solar system motion. And so just as you see the sun and the stars rise in the east and set in the west every day, not because the stars are moving, but just because the Earth's spinning on its axis, or you see a different constellation overhead each month, of the 12 ancient zodiac constellations, not because they're moving, but because the Earth is going around the sun. Likewise, this thing we call the precession, the equinox, where the stars move in the opposite direction of those first two, just slightly each year, we believe is also due to an orbit, but this is an actual orbit of the whole solar system around something else, rather than just a simple wobbling of the Earth.
And this is where the binary theory comes from.
Exactly, yes. When the current system of understanding precession was first developed, it actually came from Copernicus, who said the Earth must wobble, because he had just established that the sun was the center of the universe, and he certainly couldn't have the sun then moving across the sky, which is actually what you observe in precession. You see the sun sort of move through different constellations, and so it's now in, say, if you looked on the spring equinox, it would be in Pisces, about to go into Aquarius. That's where they say the dawning of the age of Aquarius, this sort of thing. But, he figured the sun couldn't move, and so he said the Earth wobbled, and then Newton came along and said, well, if the Earth does wobble, it's due to the gravity of the sun and the moon tugging on the Earth, because the Earth isn't quite spherical. And that must be the reason we see the stars move along, because we're wobbling, because he didn't know the sun could move either. But of course, in the last 50 years, we've not only discovered that the sun can move, but that lots of stars move in relationship to their companions. Actually, about 80% of the stars are believed to be in binary or multiple star relationships.
Okay, and that's just what we know of.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, that's up from about 60 just, 10 years ago, and that's because we've discovered a lot of very faint stars like brown dwarfs. And so, yeah, it seems like stars, they like companions as much as people do, really.
So having a single star would actually be an exception to the rule at this point.
Very much so, right. But it is a difficult paradigm to break, and until people kind of all agree that, this would be our companion star and this is how it works, they're not going to go throw out the old lunisolar theory of precession. It's really going to take, a lot more evidence before it becomes a mainstream paradigm. But in our studies, we've been looking at it for about 10 years. We think the case is really there, and it's starting to look pretty solid, even though there is no consensus on actually which star would be the companion, although there are a couple candidates.
Okay, and there's different types of binary systems, right? There's where a star rotates around another star directly, or where stars rotate around a common center of gravity.
Well, yeah. Even when stars go around each other, they would be orbiting a common center of gravity.
Okay.
Yeah, because, one would be, is usually bigger than the other, and therefore the center of gravity is a little closer to the larger star. If they're exactly the same size, even there you would say they're just orbiting a center that happens to be, the same between them.
Okay, all right.
But they've found some very exotic ones since, where they think, some planets might be orbiting around two stars at once, and things that were just thought impossible a few years ago are starting to be things that we're discovering out there today.
And the more acceptable version of this theory that some mainstream scientists are investigating is that we might have a brown dwarf or some other very large body on the outskirts of our solar system, correct?
Exactly, yes. There's some very credible scientists, including Mike Brown at Caltech, who is the fellow credited with killing Pluto. I even wrote a book on it, why it killed Pluto and why it had it coming. Because he found so many small dwarf planets that, one even larger than Pluto, that, it caused him to sort of realign things and say, okay, there's only 8 major planets and a whole bunch of dwarf planets. And so, yeah, some of these dwarf planets, the farther you get out, the less they seem to be controlled by the sun's gravity, and the more they seem to be controlled by something else. And so he's finding really weird orbits out there that he's essentially come out and said, there has to be either a very massive planet out there, like a 10th planet, or a companion star or something. And so, yeah, he's looking for something to explain, why Pluto is inclined to the plane by 17 degrees, why Sedna has such a weird orbit, and a few other things.
Okay, and when you did the book, you're very even-handed about all the different theories.
Yeah, I tried to be, and tried to not take a position there.
But personally, what do you feel is most likely our situation?
I actually think it could be a visible star scenario, and that is the star Sirius, which is the brightest star in the sky. And some people would, immediately say, well, that can't be, because that's not the closest star. They put
Right.
Sirius at about 8.6 light years, and Alpha Centauri is, closer to 4.3. But there's a much different plane there. Alpha Centauri would be sort of below us, and Sirius would sort of be in a straight line with Pluto and Sedna and some of the dwarf stars they're finding. And also some of the periodicities that are related to what we think the binary orbit is. And if you look at Sirius has a companion of its own called Sirius B, goes around Sirius A. It's in perfect resonance with some other things going on, like B goes around A roughly once every 50 years, and Pluto's at a 5-to-1 resonance with that, and Sedna's in a 2-to-1 resonance, and these things they may not be familiar to the layman, but when you have very complex systems and things are rotating around each other, they kind of get into their groove, or they don't last for billions of years.
Right.
Yeah, because they'd be chaotic systems, and so they have to get into these resonances, and that's what happened. I mean, you look at our own moon in relation to the sun. It's the reason we don't see the backside is it because it rotates at exactly the same speed that it goes around us, and so we always see one side. And so this is the type of synchronicity that planets and moons, stars develop between one another, and so there's just a ton of anecdotal evidence to suggest to me that it could be Sirius.
Now Sirius is also the only star that doesn't move with precession, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's a really strange phenomena that some scientists that have looked at it, and there's not very many, but like Jed Buchwald he's also at Caltech now. He was at MIT, but he noticed how some of the Egyptian astronomers had talked about how Sirius seems to move and keep its roughly same distance from the sun, and therefore not appear to precess like other stars. And this has been noted throughout history. Even the Egyptians talked about it, but it's always been deemed to be an artifact of sort of the Egyptian horizon where these observations were made, until there was a group in Canada just recently, the Homans, actually from Germany, living outside of Edmonton, Canada, and they've been doing transit studies of Sirius, and they've confirmed that in fact Sirius does not appear to precess. It appears to move with the sun. And Edmonton, Canada is quite a far cry from Egypt. And so it's either a phenomenal coincidence that they have some strange attributes of their horizon that just makes the sun, Sirius, appear to move with the sun, or there really is something to this. And so
now are those the same people that determined there was it affected the spin of the Earth when Sirius B went around Sirius A?
Yeah, they noticed that, and a couple other people have noticed that, but it's really only happened a couple times in modern history, because it only happens once every 50 years. But yeah, they were taking their transit readings. They've during, I think it might have been 1989-90, the last time Sirius B went in front of A, sort of in a line with the Earth. And they've been watching their readings, and they noticed that and of course what you're reading is really the spin of the Earth relative to this star, right? Because you have a fixed telescope on the Earth, and so you're timing how long it takes the Earth to spin relative to the star.
Mm-hmm.
And so they noticed that the Earth starts taking about a second longer to make its daily orbit, about a month prior to the where B transits A, and then right after that transit occurs, the Earth seems to catch up about a second a day. And so they did some research and found that another astronomer 50 years ago had noticed something similar. And so I imagine a lot more people will be watching on the next one, which is still, 30 years away or something.
Right, and there's no scientific reason that should happen, is there?
No, but there are some theories, Our view of gravity has all along been fairly simple. The farther you go, the more gravity falls off, and it's a very clear formula. But it doesn't explain a lot of things we see. It doesn't. As a matter of fact, the whole theory of dark matter and dark energy, they seem to violate what we know about gravity, and so we've assumed that there must be dark matter or dark energy. But some people are saying, no, maybe there's gravity waves and things like this. And so, yeah, that's sort of Homan's hypothesis that, maybe as B goes around A, it sets up a gravity wave, sort of this pendulum effect, which is why you see these resonances, and it could, explain other things like we're talking about here.
And doesn't that also suggest that there's a connection between our solar system and Sirius?
Yeah. So there would be a stronger gravitational effect than you would think at that distance, due to this pendulum effect, if you will. And the way he explained it to me, I went up there and visited him in Canada. He said, it takes a lot of energy, say, to get up. If you're holding a large bowl of water, say a 2-foot wide bowl in your arms, and you have to really sort of tug on this bowl to move the water and get it swishing around. But once you get it swishing around, then it takes just the slightest motion to, keep that water moving. And so, he would say that there's might be some gravitational effect working the same way between our system, Sirius A and Sirius B.
And Sirius is moving towards us, is it not?
It appears to be, yeah. I mean, people argue about that a little bit because, whenever you measure the motion of something in space, it's all relative to what?
Right.
Yeah. Because there's all these different reference frames that you can use.
And everything's moving.
Right, and everything's moving. So, but a lot of people believe that to be the case.
And now there's also the anomalies that the Voyager probes encountered as they were leaving the solar system.
Yeah, man, you're really up on this, aren't you, Soraya?
I hope so.
Yeah, that was cool. The Voyager programs, what did they leave? I mean, it's over 30 years ago. Almost 40, I think. I don't remember the exact dates, but yeah, one of them went around Jupiter, and so really got a huge kick, out into the outer reaches of the solar system. And the other one sort of took its time, taking some pictures of Saturn and some other things on the way. And so the first one, they kind of got clues when it was reaching the edge of the heliosphere, because there's a change in acceleration, magnetic field effects, and I'm not exactly sure how they measure that, but it was reported that it's hit the edge of the solar system. And then it was thought that the next one would take quite some time before it also reached it, and it reached it fairly quickly, which threw off all the calculations. And that's when people dawned on them that we've had this idea that the heliosphere is a sphere. I mean, we call it a heliosphere. But some people then realized, it's not round. It may be more bullet-shaped. And so with that, some have started to hypothesize that the solar system may be moving faster than we expect. And that's key to possibly understanding how our solar system might get around Sirius, or a common center of mass with Sirius.
Now there was a scientist in Australia that calculated how fast the solar system is moving, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Reg Cahill, and astrophysicist, very bright guy, and he knows nothing of this topic that we're talking about, as far as I know. And he was just trying to calculate the speed of the solar system in relation to the cosmic microwave background, the CMB. And in doing so, he happened to come out with exactly the same speed we need to get around a common center of mass. And it happens to be around 430 kilometers a second, which is, a couple times faster than most people would acknowledge that the solar system is moving. But, it could very well be. This is something that people have to just look at much more carefully.
Okay. And a lot of the ancient cultures also venerated Sirius, didn't they?
They did, yeah. And that's another thing to make you kind of think about this whole idea to the Egyptians, for example, it was everything. I mean, it was Isis, and she would bring life and take it away. And a lot of archaeologists have interpreted that when Sirius rises, the Nile floods, and so that it's just a sort of a crop thing, an agricultural thing. But it could have a lot larger meaning. In other words, it could be the driver behind this great year cycle that we're investigating. And of course, the Shinto in Japan, they actually call Sirius our second sun, and they will align their temples in that direction. And just even in the modern era, one of their members of parliament wrote a book about that very subject.
Wow. Okay. Well, let's go back. We're going to hear a song from the Moor, and it's called Antikythera. And this actually ties into some other stuff we're going to talk about when we come back.
Look forward to it.
Okay. So we're talking to Walter Cruttenden, author of Lost Star of Myth and Time. Did I get that right?
Perfect.
Okay. I keep wanting to say space and time. All right, and we'll be back after this. This is the Moor from, I believe, England with Antikythera.
changes it all.
And that was a band called The Moor, talking about the Antikythera device, which we're going to talk about in this next break here. You there, Walter?
I'm here.
All right. And honestly, I was kind of shocked someone wrote a song about the Antikythera device, but I thought that was kind of cool. And they're talking about how that piece of metal from the ocean floor kind of shook everything up.
Yes, and it's that type of hard evidence that really begins to open the eyes of many historians, anthropologists, archaeologists to take another look at the way we've written history. So, for example, the Antikythera device, as some of your listeners might know, is a complex geared device, 32 precision gears, that was found in a shipwreck that undoubtedly dates to at least 100 BC, the BC era. And they know that because of the amphora and the coins and other things that were found with the shipwreck. And they're all encrusted together. And the problem with that is geared devices were not developed until after, the great clockmaking era, 12, 13, 1400 AD. It just wasn't thought that man even could figure complex things like this out. And so that's just one of the many things that are sort of out of place in history when you start to sort of re-examine it. Another one is the Babylon battery. It was thought that batteries weren't developed until 1700, by Volta. And then they found these things in Baghdad, and Jason Martell, and a couple others have recreated them and find out that you actually get a charge about twice the charge of Volta's batteries, 2,000 years later. So, why, orthodontics and Egyptian mummies, prosthetic devices, trepanation devices, drilled teeth and ancient skulls in Pakistan, all this stuff that we thought was sort of modern invention was around long, long before the Dark Ages, completely lost. And then, we have the Renaissance, and we reinvent this stuff.
And this comes to the second main part of your theory, which is that time and culture is actually cyclical.
Yes, and that is, I wouldn't say it's my theory. I would simply say I'm trying to investigate it.
Okay, right.
Because it's a very ancient, common belief, before the Christian era, before the Darwinian evolution theory. This was the common belief that history moved in a vast cycle of time, just as the year had its seasons, and just as the day had, night and day, that everything was cyclical like this.
Okay, and
yeah, that's what Plato, of course, called the Great Year, but the Indians called it, the Yugas.
Right.
Different cultures, the Mayan would say it's different suns, the Hopis would say it's different worlds, and some of them just called it the precession of the equinox, or the movement of the heavens that would bring the dark ages and then, golden ages. The Greeks were the clearest. They said it's iron, bronze, silver, and golden age, which they related to the age of man, the age of the hero, the age of the demigods, and then the age of the gods. And Hesiod spoke a lot about the golden age in his writings, that, it was a time of peace and plenty, and mankind lived in tune with nature, sort of a pre-Babel age. And then, of course, he's lamenting in his writings that we've come down so far, as, many of the Babylonian, Akkadian writings talk about the same thing. This is a myth common to over 30 ancient cultures, according to Giorgio de Santillana, the former professor of the history of science at
And
MIT.
and that's one of the two co-authors of a book called Hamlet's Mill, correct?
Yes, yeah, just one of my favorite books. When I came across it, I knew a little bit about this, but seeing the vast amount of evidence they put together without even knowing anything about, a potential astronomical cause or, really knowing much about the Indian Yuga system. They were just fascinated with how many ancient cultures were talking about the stars and all talking about this cycle of precession. And so...
And it seemed like it had to be important to them.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this great scholars, Giorgio, the professor of history at MIT there, had written a prior book on the origins of science, where he was looking for where things were invented, and then he got together with this anthropologist, Hertha von Deschen, who's an equally brilliant scholar, although out of Goethe University on the Frankfurt campus, and she had been studying the actual myth and folklore of some ancient cultures, and it was just driving her nuts why they kept talking about the sky. And then the two of them really kind of had this revelation that these ancients could read the sky like we would read a book, and then they talked about this cycle that obviously we have long since forgotten.
And this cycle times out to the precession of the equinoxes. It's all the same. The Yuga cycle, the great year, is all the same as the precession.
Right, yeah, because the precession is just, the stars moving backwards. Instead of the daily procession of stars, it's precession. They go the other way. And, yeah, it's the observable related to this cycle. And so, the ancients, they used markers. They would use the 12 constellations like we would use the numbers 1 through 12 on a clock, and then they would use the equinox, or you can use the solstice if you wish, to sort of see where you are in this great cycle, just as we would use the sun or the shadow from the sun to tell where we are during the day or during the year, where the sun is on the horizon. Tells you whether we're close, in the winter solstice or summer solstice or equinox in between.
Okay. Now, this is kind of what got you into this research, isn't it? The idea of the cyclic nature of time?
Yeah, very much so. When I was a little boy, I was fascinated with history, and my mom bought me a bunch of books on ancient cultures, and they seemed to me to be pretty advanced, and it's kind of something I accepted. And then as I got into school, history was always the one subject I actually did terrific at, and but they kept saying that things were very linear, and generally if something came before us, it had to be more primitive, and it wasn't jiving with me, because I'd been reading about the Sumerians, who had a tremendous knowledge of astronomy, mathematics. They built fascinating structures, sewer systems, and then it sort of declined through the Akkadian, Babylonian, until the whole Mesopotamian area just turns to dust and they become nomadic tribes. Or the same thing in the Indus Valley, where you had Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, and they built with, uniform building blocks, and they too had, plumbing system, indoor heating, and things like this. Things that didn't come back to Europe or the West until, just a few hundred years ago. And
we see that everywhere around the world too, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, our archaeology is getting much better. That's sort of a side benefit of all the development that's going on in the world. We're finding more and more things, and we're much more careful about them nowadays rather than just plowing them over. And they're realizing, yes, that sophisticated, ancient cultures were far more advanced than earlier presumed. And that's, that doesn't even count some of the things that we don't understand. I mean, much of the whole megalithic scene, things, the cairns, dolmens, the alignment of these ancient tombs and henges, these stone circles, of which there's probably 1,000 just throughout Western Europe. We don't even know what those were for, but there was a lot of very interesting building going on before we even had written history.
And the Atlantis myth kind of goes into all of this too, doesn't it?
Yeah. I think the only written reference to Atlantis
was Plato.
It was Plato, and so he pegs it back where, almost a half a precession cycle ago. So it's very much near sort of the end of the last golden age, and so a lot of people like John Anthony West and others have sort of looked to that. When they see that Egypt sort of starts at its height, they're building the greatest structures on Earth in between sort of the first and fourth dynasty, and then later on Egypt's just getting gaudier and shoddier, and then they can't build anything after a while. So he uses a predecessor culture to try to explain where it could come from, because in the present way histories are written, we just don't know, and something like this shouldn't happen. You shouldn't have a culture started at its best. And so
and we see that in numerous places like Mexico and such, are the same type of thing.
They're sort of the more advanced archaeology becomes, the greater the appreciation for ancient cultures, versus when archaeology a couple hundred years ago was just starting, and it was just really treasure hunting at the time. Let's find a tomb and dig it open and see if there's some gold inside.
Right.
And so much was lost, and because things were built out of stone, I think many people figured, well, heck, it's got to be a more primitive culture, and yet,
I always looked at the way we had to get into the Great Pyramid as a bunch of children breaking into this really complex machine that we don't understand, but we don't realize that's what we're doing.
Yeah, it's something, and I think, there are some wonderful scientists that have done some work there, and like John Burke, looking at many of these megalithic structures and buildings that maybe hint at the value of them, that still we're in our infancy there and trying to understand them.
Now, the cycle of light and dark ages that we can at least see some of, you think this is tied directly to another star, like the binary precession?
Yeah, I think the cause is celestial driven, because you look at this first two cycles that we're so familiar with, the diurnal cycle, the Earth rotating on its axis. It's not that it just causes day and night. It actually causes our consciousness to change from waking to sleeping, and other photosynthesis to sort of flick on and flick off, and many other subtle changes going on there, because our bodies have adapted to this very basic celestial cycle. And likewise, the second one that takes 365 days as the Earth orbits the sun on a tilt. It means the Earth is getting more and less electromagnetism from the sun, per square inch or centimeter, however you want to measure it.
Right.
And therefore it's not just the seasons, it's trillions of life forms springing out of the ground, blooming, giving their fruit, and then decaying again. Billions of animals spawning or migrating in mass. It's the trigger for this tremendous change in life and behavior. And so if there is indeed a third motion, our whole solar system going around something, then you have to expect that it's also going to have a pretty significant effect, although on a much longer time scale, and therefore the change is less and less notable.
Right. And as we get closer to, if for instance Sirius is the other point, the electromagnetic fields from Sirius are going to interfere and interact with us and our planet.
If that is the way it works, and I would be a little careful or hesitant to draw the quick conclusion that just because the day and night cycle and the seasonal cycle is caused by how the Earth's position relative to our sun, that this other sun is the immediate effect. And I say that because of the writings of Swami Sri Yukteswar. He wrote just a brilliant book, The Holy Science, which talks about this, and it's published in 1894, so maybe we're not as advanced as we think we are. But anyway, yeah, he says that, we go around this other star, and that's simply the drive mechanism. And what it does, it pushes our system closer to and then farther from, and changes our solar system speed relative to a third point, which is called Vishnu Navi. Some think might be the Pleiades, or there's a lot of speculation, but no one knows for certain. And it's that third sort of super energetic point that would have the effect. And so, I think, heck, we're still like in kindergarten trying to figure this thing out.
Yeah, at least we got a clue. Now, in order to notice a cycle like that, though, people would have had to notice it over a period of time. It's not something you could... you don't notice cycles when they happen once.
Is this true? Yes.
So how far back do you think it would go that we were conscious and aware of these cycles of golden and dark ages? I mean, do you think like Michael Cremo's onto something when he says we could be millions of years old?
I wouldn't doubt it. When we find little bits of evidence that suggests that we are millions of years old under our current paradigm, that whatever came before us must be more primitive, we always say, well, they must have been very primitive people with small brains, even though, Neanderthal had a larger brain size than we do now. Or you find something that looks like, almost identical to footprints on a beach they find in...
lava.
Yeah, lava in Mexico.
And Africa now.
Yeah, and they agree that it's footprints until
they date it.
Till they date it. Then, oh man, now it can't be footprints.
What was the woman who found them in Africa said that it must be a earlier version of man who had the exact same foot structure as modern man.
Yes, things like this. And so I wouldn't doubt it. And to understand then, why, you don't find cell phones and computers and things that we would associate with, sort of the peak of consciousness right now. You really need to dig in and understand the character of each phase of the cycle, and that's where the Indians have done such brilliant work.
Right, and to imagine that we've lost that much of our history potentially is just stunning.
True, yeah, and it's not just the cycle that might cause consciousness to rise and fall, but heck, nature has its way too,
Yeah.
Comets and asteroids and tectonic plate movements and tsunamis and all sorts of things, plus if you just, leave almost anything out for a few thousand years,
it'll be gone.
Yeah, not that much is going to survive very long.
Now, do you think there's also a cyclic line of disasters that happen with this cycle, or is that just random nature?
I don't know. There could be, some Dr. Robert Schock's done some work there. He's going to be one of our speakers, by the way, at our conference next weekend.
Oh, that's next weekend. Okay.
Yeah, the Conference on Precession and Ancient Knowledge. Let me get a quick plug in here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's at Rancho Mirage at the Westin Hotel and it's our 8th annual one. It's where we bring all together a bunch of scientists that are exploring this cycle of the ages, and we're particularly interested in how much the ancients knew and what's the evidence. And so Robert has just returned from Göbekli Tepe, this amazing 12,000-year-old site in Turkey that really just rewrites the history books. And he'll be our keynote speaker talking about that, but we've got a bunch of other speakers. So if any of your listeners are interested, they can find out more information by going to cpaconline.com.
Okay.
It's just cpaconline.com.
And you do have some clips up on YouTube from past CPAC conferences.
Yeah, I think they're on there, and I got to put a whole bunch more on someday. But yeah, the work being done by all these guys is really remarkable, and some of them are very colorful characters like John Anthony West or Robert Bauval or Graham Hancock.
Right.
And some of them are much more on the hard sciences side. Physicist John Daring and Robert Schoch, as I mentioned, and many others. And it's sort of the combination of them all that this consensus is developing that we've got it all wrong. Ancients were much smarter than we were taught, sort of just over the last few hundred years.
Okay. Well, we're going to hear another song relating to this whole thing. In this case, a band called Agora, and they have a song called Kali Yuga.
Okay.
And talking about finding the light in the dark age. So when we come back, I have a few kind of speculative questions for you, and then we'll let you go.
Super cool.
All right. So here's Agora, Last Exit for the Lost. You're on the last exit for the Lost on WVBR FM Ithaca. That was Agora right there. And on the phone, we still have Walter Cruttenden. I hope.
Here.
You there?
I'm here.
All right. And that was a song called the Kali Yuga. Of course, talking about the cycles of time.
And the Kali's the lowest of the four. The Greeks, again, call them the Iron, Bronze, Silver, and Golden Age. And the Indians, the Kali, Dwapara, Treta, and Satya Yugas.
And we're just out of the Kali Yuga at this point, right?
Yeah, the way Sri Yukteswar measures it, we would be in the precessional cycle. We are a couple hundred years out of it. He puts it around 1700 or so, and says that the Renaissance is sort of the awakening from the purely material age. You know, when mankind only perceives, only believes what he can perceive through his senses. And the world's pretty brutal. He begins to, use his intellect a lot more. Consciousness expands a little bit, and he realizes, there's electricity and magnetism, and electromagnetic fields, and molecules, and there's just this whole other world there that we not only begin to understand theoretically, but then start to use in medicine or to make devices with. And that's now you have we can talk to people on the other side of the world and instantly, and things that would have been considered magic back in the depths of the Kali Yuga, it's now commonplace.
They considered magic 100 years ago.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's how fast we're moving. And some people sort of have a new age idea about these changing ages that, everything's going to be instantly better when we're, in the next age. But, it doesn't mean your problems instantly go away. It means that the whole world and consciousness is changing. And, we can solve a lot of old problems. You have antibiotics, and life ages spans are twice what they were. And, instead of every nation warring at each other, less than 5% of warring. But you still have problems out there.
Yeah, we definitely have problems out there. There's no way around that.
Yeah. The media would have you think, though, that the world's coming to an end.
Well, true, and that's another thing. The 2012 date on the Mayan calendar. Now, how do you view that?
I saw a cute cartoon the other day where there's this Mayan chief. He's at a bar and he's leaning over his drink and he's kind of sad, and the bartender leans over to him and says, "Hey, cheer up, buddy. It ain't the end of the world." And I think that's it. I think, it's sort of our simplistic view of a changing of the ages. The Mayan were brilliant sky watchers and calendar keepers.
And they themselves said they didn't invent the calendar. It was passed down to them.
Yeah. And, the dates on it go much longer than we would date the Mayan culture.
Right.
I think just because the calendar ends, it doesn't mean the world ends. Our calendar ends every year, and we start January 1st again.
Right.
Yeah. And so, it's an evolution that goes on, and I'm sure they were thinking in similar terms, but maybe of evolution on a larger scale.
Well, it also is the alignment with the galactic center there.
Yeah, that's one of these markers. So we've talked about as you can use the equinoxes or solstices to sort of see where you are on this cycle. And so it would be a natural place when you see an alignment. And, of course, modern science didn't understand where the galactic center was until about 1970s or so with radio astronomy.
Yeah.
And it's sure enough, it's right there in the dark cleft, which is what John Major Jenkins said that the Mayans recognized.
Right, and to be able to calculate that so far in the future is just astounding.
Yeah, it is. And of course, it's a rough period. I mean, we put it at December 21st, 2012, because that's where the calendar was, but the actual transition of the sun through this alignment spot is, roughly takes 20 years or so.
Okay, so I had a couple speculative questions here. Now, the Dogon tribe knew all about Sirius being a binary star system.
It appears to be, yeah.
And they had said they got their information from people from Sirius. But I think it was Laird Scranton was talking about how they described them as not fully corporeal beings. I don't know how much you know about that.
I don't know much about that part of it. I've talked to Laird at length on it, had dinner with him a few times, and he's been a regular speaker at CPAC. And one of the things he told me was, they would point to the mass on the wall. They have a mass for every generation, like every chief or something like this. And that it goes back like 60 mass. So that's a long, long time,
Well, do you think it's possible that that was happening during a golden age where maybe we could see things that we can't see now? And that possibly this is also how ancestor worship started?
You're getting to, I think, an important point here that where it hints at what are we, So back to a time when we, the veil was thinner, if you would. And so there's this time mentioned in the Bible, the pre-Babel age, when mankind lived in tune with nature and stuff before he started building tons of things. And then Yogananda talks about it in his book Autobiography of a Yogi, The Cycle. He says that in 4100 AD, when we go from the Dwapara to the Treta Yuga, that by that time, telepathy and clairvoyance will, quote, once again be common knowledge. And so if you get to this point where, mankind's realizing himself as more of a ethereal being that's just sort of wearing a body, experiencing things, then what you're talking about would seem much more realistic, communicating with,
different consciousnesses.
Yeah, other consciousness. Yeah, it's hard to talk about because we don't have much of a language for it nowadays. And if you do, you almost have to say other dimensions or aliens, and you sound crazy. But I think there's, there's a science there that we don't understand yet.
And when you look at some of the research done on the UFO phenomena, the abduction phenomena, it seems more to be a multi-dimensional thing rather than an extraterrestrial thing. So maybe it was something we were in better contact with at some point.
Yeah, could well be. Could well be.
Now, you've said that Nibiru is actually the star Sirius.
Yeah, and I'm just going by what the most of the ancient scholars have said, And
do you think that Sitchin had mistranslated it as a planet?
Well, these translations are very fuzzy. What do we have? There's something like 100,000 cuneiform tablets that have been found, and there's probably another couple 100,000 that are just in bits and pieces.
Right.
And of the 100,000, really, Stefan Mahl, who's the foremost Assyrianologist, would say that only a few thousand of those have been read, and he would say use the term read very lightly because we don't know the meaning for half these terms. We know our meaning for some of these terms,
right,
but not their meaning. And so yeah, he would say that we really don't understand it very well. And what was your point on that?
I forgot where we started. Oh, with Nibiru, I'm just wondering,
exactly.
If you thought he just mistranslated that, I mean, so many people are like Sitchin's ideas.
Right, and so the point was that many people interpret Nibiru to be a bright object in the sky.
Right.
And so most of the scholars have said, it probably refers to either the brightest star, Sirius, or possibly to Venus or Jupiter, when it's in a bright position.
Right.
And and therefore, because it's the crossing star and it has all these attributes of what you would expect if it was a companion, to me, brightest star sounds like Sirius, because that is the brightest star we see when we look up. But I could understand why Sitchin, if he was, say, influenced by Van Daniken's work or somebody, looking for
ancient aliens,
right? Then very logically, yes, if some planet or star is getting close to us, then it is going to be the brightest object. And so, yeah, I could see how that whole interpretation came about, but I would look at it, much simpler. I just think it's the brightest star.
Well, if the Dogon people say that they met people from Sirius that gave them this knowledge, I mean, it's not an unrealistic idea to think that maybe Sumer was saying something similar that wasn't translated right.
Could be, yeah. And when you talk about people on other planets, I was just reading the Swedenborg's work, and he was this...
that would have been back in the 70s, right?
1700s, yeah.
1700s, okay.
Right,
yes.
And so he was, famed for inventing mining equipment and improving mining techniques and miners' lives and things like this, but also a tremendous mystic who, he was on one side of Sweden and knew that Stockholm was burning hundreds of miles away, and he announced it at a dinner party, so he was a great psychic, and so he would say, that there were beings on other planets, even in our own solar system, but I think he looked at life differently than we look at it. We would have the standard textbook thing. It's got to have oxygen and water, and
right.
Therefore it couldn't exist. But he would say, hey, they even exist on the sun.
Right, and just a form we're not familiar with.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, the standard scientific data says that it takes 2,600 years for the precession of the equinox, but the older cultures say 24,000 years, roughly. And why do you think there's a change there?
Okay, so, just to correct, so most of the scientific literature today would say close to 26,000. The latest current estimate would peg it at 25,770.
Okay.
And some of the older literature, the 24,000. And it's because the rate of precession is variable. So...
And again, that shouldn't be if it's just a wobble of the Earth now, should it?
No, it's very difficult to explain it if it's just a wobble of the Earth. You could see a little bit of change, but not the steady change we've seen over the last few hundred years. I mean, it's harder to explain. And so it's a bit of an esoteric point from a scientific standpoint, but the precession rate was going 50 arc seconds a year in 1700s, 50.1, and 1800s, 50.2, most of the 1900s.
So it's speeding up.
And 50.3 now. And so if you measure how long then it takes to complete a circle, when you just go that many arc seconds per year, it's dropping from 26 to 25.9 to 25.8, etc.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so, we think it will average 24 or very close to it, because that's all the numbers we run fit close to that.
Okay. One of the questions I think people would ask, especially if they don't know a lot about this type of stuff, would be if there's anything to it, why is the mainstream not looking at it?
Looking at
the idea that Sirius could be a second sun, that there's a change in the cycle of the ages.
Oh, I think it just takes a while. There's a paradigm established that says, first of all, it says the sun doesn't move, and therefore we must be going very slow. And you have this whole thing with Copernicus and Newton and this established view. And now some branches of astronomy realize, everything's moving. But it hasn't been incorporated into, other branches completely yet. And So
it just takes science. Mainstream science takes a while to grasp any new concepts or accept anything new theory-wise, generally.
especially when things are really complicated and esoteric. So, if one wants to dive into the lunisolar theory, I've written a paper on it just recently. The left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing half the time, and I have talked to probably 100 astronomers on the issue, and none of them specialize in figuring out if there's any problems with lunisolar theory, because it's nobody's job.
So it just falls between the cracks.
It does. And the current system gets you close, and they tweak it every 10 years or so. And the observable's a little different. Well, then we must have just forgot one of the inputs. So they now have 4,000 inputs, and they'll just add a few inputs.
Well, now, if you turn out to be right, and there's this cyclic nature of time and another star, what mainstream theories are going to be completely thrown out if this is ever accepted?
Well, again, please don't call it my theory, because all I'm doing is,
you're rediscovering it, you're bringing it to
I'm just dusting off what ancient cultures believed, and even Sri Yukteswar, he did such a great job of explaining it in his book over 100 years ago.
Yeah, but you can't discount the work you've done as well.
Yeah, no, so I'm trying to put some sort of modern science to it, and I think, it's going to sort of change the paradigm and the way you look at a lot of things. So instead of this crudely Darwinian viewpoint of things, and I do believe in evolution. I just believe there's cycles that give it lots of color along the way. And so
and that it might go back a lot farther than we realize.
Could, and therefore it changes archaeology, it changes anthropology, it changes, the way we look at history, and instead of sort of denigrating the past as we have quite a bit, that there's not much to learn there, they were a bunch of primitives and we're much better at things now, your whole mindset changes. Anything prior to 3000 BC, we should really try to figure out why they aligned things such a way they did, why they built with such massively large stones when it's very inconvenient to do so. and there's something going on there. I mean, John Burke's work shows that they seem to know how the Earth energies are working. And so I think it's going to change the way we invent and look at building and relate to the rest of nature. I just think it's going to have dramatic impact.
And I think it would have a dramatic impact on the way we look at ourselves, and that we can be changed that much by the position in space that we are.
Beautiful thought, and it really makes you think, what are we? Because if the Greeks say, the age of man, then the age of the hero, then the age of the demigods, and the age of the gods, it suggests what Jesus Christ himself said, ye are gods. These things that I do, ye shall do also, and greater things. And he might wear a golden age consciousness now, as a few people seem to be able to do, but the mass of the people are still believing, they're very limited, woe is me, we can't do much about our problems.
Right.
And nothing could be farther from the truth. I think it's such a hopeful message to realize that, we can have a golden age consciousness. And so if you relate it to these other cycles, Soraya, just as, during nighttime, we don't have to stumble around in the dark, we can invent flashlights and things like that. Or just as during the winter, we don't have to freeze, we invent warm houses and blankets and heaters and things. Likewise, there's certain techniques to have a golden age consciousness, meditation and, eating better foods and living in tune with our environment. And we could be doing a lot of things to just sort of lift consciousness now. And a lot of the clues lie with our ancient ancestors.
And do you think these ancient cultures, as they were falling apart, intentionally embedded these myths into our culture and made these giant structures with all these mathematical formulas in them to preserve that knowledge, that hopefully it could be used as soon as possible?
I think that's part of it. Yeah, they said this stuff better last because we gotta make it last during a very long dark age here. Yeah, I think it's at least that, and maybe much more to it. They could be knowledge machines themselves, and and even helping the Earth in certain ways that we don't understand.
All right. Well, that seems like a good place to leave it. And I wanted you to want to plug your websites and stuff again.
Yeah. Again, I invite everyone to come to the conference on precession and ancient knowledge this Friday, October 5th to 7th at Rancho Mirage. It's near Palm Springs, California, and it's really fun, and we're going to explore these topics in depth. I think we'll have a live stream on that, and people can find that at CPAConline.com. That's CPAConline.com.
Any plans to do one of those on the East Coast at any point?
Yeah, I've talked to Shock about that, and I think maybe Shock and John West and some of the guys, Scott Creighton, might go run with that idea on the East Coast. Hope they do.
Okay, and you have a few different websites.
Yeah, people that are sort of interested in the harder research, on the binary system and things like that, can find some of the astronomical data on binaryresearchinstitute.org, and that there's some papers and things on there, some of the math, and I guess Lost Star book. I do have a children's book out now on the topic.
Really?
The Great Year Adventures with Tommy the Time Traveling Turtle. And so, I've been explaining this subject to grown-ups for the last decade, and writing a children's book was actually the most challenging, because you'd have to figure out a way to say it in the simplest terms, and brevity doesn't come easy to me. And so anyway, check it out. It's on Amazon. It seems to be getting a lot of popularity.
And your Lost Star book is also still available on Amazon, right?
Yeah, sure is. And so is the Great Year DVD with James Earl Jones. It's just a simple way to get a good feel for the whole concept. It's only 45 minutes.
Yes. Was it on PBS initially?
Yeah. Out here in California it was, and they'll play it now and then.
All right. Anything else people should know? Anything?
No, let's all try to tune into the ancient wisdom and bring on the higher ages now.
Okay. Oh, we didn't mention your radio show.
Oh, yeah.
Cosmic Influence.
Right. So we do this podcast when I'm able to get to it. I apologize, I haven't done many of those lately. I'm not as good as you are, Soraya. I think there's 60 podcasts out there, and it's where I interview different authors and researchers in this whole general field. And yeah, it's available on iTunes. It's called The Cosmic Influence.
And it's free.
It's free, yeah. Absolutely.
All right. Well, I thank you so much for calling, Walter.
Oh, thanks for having me on.
By the way, what's the worst someone's mispronounced your last name?
We won't go there, but you had it spot on.
I'm glad. Okay. Thank you so much for this.
All right.
And we're going to hear Therion's Kali Yuga 3, which is talking about coming out of the Kali Yuga and the changing of the cycles of time. So here we go. Last Exit for the Lost.